So we'll get a little more blue in there. Now, I'm dealing in a much wider dynamic range now because I close the aperture, right? What I'm going to do is actually also grab that environment. Now this is an interesting lighting scenario in MachStudio. I just have like an ambient fill here that I'm bringing up, but it's actually, you can drive image-based lighting in here. You can load EXR files, you can load HDR files that will light into either your diffuse or specular channel. So you have this extra layer of lighting, which is just classic image-based lighting. And that, when you bring those in, they'll actually clamp your camera to the exposure settings that are coming from your IBL, because sometimes if you have a sphere on, you actually want to relate directly to your sphere on. So that will clamp the camera to that. Okay, I'm going to grab that background light, and I'm just going to tweak that out a little bit. We'll just bring that up into a higher intensity. So you notice I'm just putting a higher intensity in that light, and I'm going to open that angle. Oh, we'll do it like this. So here's what I want to show you here. This is really fun. So I have my aperture. My aperture is really closed. Let's select the camera again. Aperture is closed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. Okay, so if you notice what's going to start to happen is I'm getting really, you notice that bloom is happening in lens. And it's not a 2D effect. This is actually reading the pixels. As the camera would move around, it would actually expose the pixels differently, creating that effect. All right, that's always fun. So if you notice, there's like this really nice, you guys are missing a little bit of your midtones in that. Okay, so let me push it a little higher. So if you notice, as it comes to this really nice wrapping of the light that's starting to happen here. Now, this is a really cool example, because even though it's more balanced on my screen here, what I'm going to do is, here's the situation. You want to have gotten to this point, like, after several hours of rendering and several hours of compositing, like, wow, we really like those blooms, and shit, the skin shader is blowing out. We can't. What does that do in your production workflow now? We've all been there. You have to, like, okay, let's pull the tapestry apart and go back. But this is the power of what I'm trying to explain here, that I have several entry points directly. I can go right into it. With looking at almost my final render, I can bring down that exposure directly. So this is what we mean by changing workflow, is that through the light sets and attaching these different, the lights, of course, are light linked to the material, etc. So I was able to kind of keep that silhouette I like and expose her face in a better way. Okay? I want to talk a little bit about render layers, and I'm going to bring up another file. I wanted to say something about textures. Any one of these textures fields are all animatable, so I mean, you can do some really fancy stuff with texture animations, driving the materials as well. There's also a number of new math operations. I want to show you one thing that just is really fun, and I said I was going to do one thing, and I did another time. Classic. All right. And this light, I'm going to I can insert a ramp inside of the light, and this is kind of fun. So this is a classic ramp operation here, and you can see what that's going to do. Enable ramp. So you can see I can actually define. I'm actually projecting a gel through the light. I can do some really cool effects through this. So I'm driving this live, and this will be fun. Let's do like that. You can see I can really create some very interesting lighting situations here by just actually playing directly over the light gel. Again, something I didn't say about the lights themselves are contributing to the ambient, diffuse, and specular path. You can make lights that are specifically linked to a render path. It's a very powerful concept. So it's not just light linking on the object level, it's light linking at the material level and the material render path. Okay? All right, let's cool that down a little bit, actually. And I'll do something fun here. Let's see what I want to do. Okay. All right, we like it. Let's do a little rendering. How am I doing for time? Someone know? Okay, I'm lost all sense. All right. Okay, So I'm gonna.
Much time
So basically, rendering. For us, rendering was what we call it capture actually. So I'm gonna grab. You can create a capture channel on anything, but on this camera there's a capture channel. I'll just split that channel and we'll. Let's do. We'll render out like 20 frames, okay? And I'll do a quick preview here, and let me save that out as a demo so we don't lose this. Okay, so here's the render panel. So if you notice, I already have a layer in there, but basically how you do is I'll render out any number of the usual suspects, anywhere from EXR files, which are essentially it's an ILM format for float that allows you to create your own layers and passes inside of it. It's a very, very powerful way of working with compositing. We highly recommend it. So EXR, HDR, TGA, the usual suspects. We'll just do a quick MOV, and I'll compress it to a JPEG compression. Camera 1, we'll render out, we'll just do a quick render at 852 by 480. I can go up to 16 times samples a pixel, but I'll do it at 2, which will give us 4 samples per pixel aliasing. There's a number of really nice algorithms for the samples, so length of, sig, triangle. Again, usual suspect. I'll do a Gaussian. You can control your brush filters. So what's happening at render is that we're able to take the precision of the lighting, the precision of the depth, and the precision of pretty much everything, and bring it higher on one end, and also run a number of very high-end anti-aliasing algorithms on it. Okay, I'm sure I can click everything I need to, but I'll move, there we go. So here, the master layer contains all the objects, and then render preferences. So the render pref on the first one will be the default HDR renderer with everything on. We'll turn on the AO as well. And we'll do a depth feeling on the AO. So the AO system is actually going through the depth feeling and order-independent sorting for transparency as well. And a number of other preferences I won't deal with right now. See, I can just create a new render layer. So all I did is create a new layer. I'll rename it, what do we want to call that? Let's do vector. So for instance, if I wanted to get the vector map out, which is the velocity map, which we use to create motion, 3D motion work. So in this one, I'll just change it to that velocity map, and that's what it will render. We'll use some extra aliasing on that. So you notice most of these have their own, each of this layer kind of has its own setting, yeah? If we were using EXR, every one of these render passes would be placed inside as RGBA. So it would say like master RGBA, vector RGBA, etc. So you can actually get at it. The problem with EXR files is that depending on what you're using, reading the layers out can be crazy. Because you can write anything. You could write like, this is the layer I want to use at shot 20, and then you'll never see it again because no software can read that. So how you write those layers is very important. Okay, so let's render that. Maybe I should choose a directory. Yeah, there you go. Otherwise, okay, so I'm just going to do a quick render here of those. So those 20 frames right now with like a sample of what we're going to render out, it's going to render in about 30, 40 seconds. So it's a pretty fast way to get at a beauty pass with your HDR, with depth of field, and we're rendering 20 frames out right now. And then when it's done with that, it will loop through, because I called it, I'm making a JPEG movie, it will probably loop through and put the other layer at the end of it. And that's your vector, because if you're used to working with velocity maps, you'll recognize what that is. That's actually and you really shouldn't render your velocity map into a movie. It really should go into float. So I just rendered it to show you how it goes. So the two files we just rendered are, as you see, it created the proper directories, and let's see here. Vector. Interesting. I wonder if I have. So this was a quick test I just did that came out in about 20 seconds. All right. Now, clearly this is a very stylized, the direction for this movie was very stylized. It's a fantasy story with goblins and witches and princesses and all this kind of stuff.